Hello and welcome back to the channel. So I am a latecomer to the G Pro X Superlight party, but I picked one up recently in the Christmas sales for about £90 and shared my very early thoughts in the video linked in the description below. And now that I've used the mouse for between 10 and 20 hours, completely unmodded other than the mouse feet I've installed this evening, I have some follow-up thoughts that I feel are worth sharing. So I'll break this down into pros and cons of the mouse, and I'll limit the scope of this video only to the points that I have noticed, which means if I don't mention the feature or the specification in this video, it's either because it hasn't been good or bad enough for me to notice, or I simply don't have enough experience to comment on it. Think along the lines of connectivity and click latency testing. That is definitely not my area of expertise. So, for the positive elements of the mouse, the thing that I noticed immediately was the shape and how comfortable it was to hold and use. I feel like for newcomers to PC gaming, mouse shape is probably the most important factor when choosing your weapon of choice, and the G Pro X is super easy to feel comfortable with, and I personally was beating high scores with this mouse almost immediately in Kovacs. When I use the G303 Shroud Edition, which is this one, you see the shape difference. And if we just hold this up here, you can see the back of the mouse looks really different. You see this big curve here. This is where it sits in your hand. That forces me into a aggressive claw. See how my fingers are quite curled up? And I'm pulling it into the back of my palm using just that hump of the mouse. However, I feel like with the G Pro X, it kind of soothes me and my hand into a relaxed claw. You see how my fingers aren't quite so curled up, and I'm kind of like hugging the side of my mouse, hugging the side of the mouse with my fingers. And this really is because of the way the mouse shape naturally feels your palm. It doesn't have a really distinct hump at the back of the mouse, like I mentioned, for you to use as an anchor for an aggressive claw grip. The only awkward thing about the shape I've noticed is that with my hand size being about 21.5 by 11 centimeters, and that half centimeter is important, as we know, fellas, is I don't have a natural resting place for my little finger, and it feels a bit awkward if I try to grip the mouse at the back end of the mouse. So I tend to just leave my fingers straight along the edge. The mouse wheel is different to other mice I've tried too. So you can see it protrudes quite a lot out the top of the mouse in comparison to my other options here. And this was something that has grown on me since I started playing with it. It's not the most clicky in terms of the steps you feel when you scroll the wheel, but it feels good to use, and I like having access to more of the wheel as a result of it protruding more aggressively from the front. Another positive is the battery life. I haven't had to recharge the G Pro X at all in the 2 weeks I've had it, and this is a nice feature I feel goes underrated in the peripheral community. In terms of my performance in game, I've definitely noticed an improvement in my consistency when aiming, and I put this down to the comfortable shape of the mouse and also the recent aim training I've been working towards. I've noticed my games with recent aim training efforts to have been more significant and noticeable than with my other mice, and I'm not sure if there is a correlation to draw there or not. But my conclusion on this point would be that I feel the G Pro X is a good mouse for accuracy and consistency in-game. With reference to the negative elements of the mouse, I do not like the side buttons. They feel a bit inconsistent or difficult to press, and have messed me up in game 1 or 2 occasions. I typically bind grenades to the front mouse button and melee to the back mouse button, and I feel like I need to angle my thumb a certain way to ensure the button actually works. They don't have a very satisfying feel to use, and I'm certain this isn't an issue with my specific unit. Instead, I think this is just a sign of how the build quality of mice has moved on since the G Pro X was designed and released about 2 years ago. So if I hold this up, hopefully you'll be able to see, maybe not, how mushy it is in comparison to something like this one. Just feels much better. The buttons are just much bigger, much easier to find and press, whereas these ones just kind of feel like they're part of the mouse, and it was just a little bit less consistent to press. That's just maybe a personal gripe that I have. The only other negative I can think of, which is much less of a problem and more just an observation again of how mouse have improved since the release of the G Pro X Superlight, is the tensioning of the clicks. I feel it's less satisfying to use in-game than other mice I've tried. And I'll try and demonstrate this just by holding it up to the camera now. So if you look at the mouse, I'm applying pressure. It's not done anything yet. So that's the click. That's the click. Feels a bit mushy. It's not too bad. And when I compare that to something like the Orochi, so pressure, click, it's pretty tight in comparison. And then even better again, so this is the G303 Shroud. Very little travel between pressure and click. Maybe that's just something I'm being particularly fussy about. So those are the only negatives I can think of, and what would I do to improve the G Pro X going forward. So just a couple of points here, which I've just covered. So other than just generally upgrading the internals of the mouse to be more competitive with the current offerings on the mouse market, I'd suggest incorporating better tensioning for the clicks and implementing improved side buttons. And maybe consider giving it a bit more real estate for my pinky to grip onto on the side of the mouse. Possibly increasing the hump size at the back too, although I recognise that would change entirely the feel of the mouse. Overall, I'd give the G Pro X Superlight 8 out of 10. If I was going to give it a score out of 10, recognising there is room for improvement in the design, but that it really is as good as advertised. If you are a first-time mouse buyer and you want a mouse that isn't a risky purchase, and you can find it on a sale at around £90, I would recommend picking this up. Okay, lovely job. Ta-ta for now.